any piece of advice that you have for other teams in the or ops leaders in the early stages or in the scaling stages, that any mental models that you can share that will add some value for them?
Absolutely. So I think it's important for the operations leader to be able to provide a constancy of purpose to the team, right? And I'll tell you what I mean by that. In a startup, when you're actually starting, many a times you don't know what is the problem that you're trying to solve, and you'll come to do multiple things and you'll figure out. But what has to be clear upfront is what is the purpose? What is it that you're trying to solve? How you get to that answer is a different problem, right? The operations team, because the orientation of the operations team is always to create processes and then being able to do it on a day-to-day basis, they need that constancy to exist. I think we underestimate the importance of routine. And it's also a dichotomous situation, right? People who come into startups saying that it is very flexible. Every day you don't know what's going to happen. You start your day fresh every day. But I think it's a cliche.
Yes.
Right? Most people want to know upfront what they're going to do because, I like to give the example of kids growing up or children or babies when they grow up, right? When a baby starts to crawl or when they start to walk, within the first 3 days, walking becomes autonomous. And that is the only time then they can the brain can start focusing on the next task to learn. And that is the only way growth happens, right? Tasks have to become autonomous. Tasks have to become routine. And that is super important to appreciate.
Yep.
As an operations leader or even as a startup founder, startup leader, if you're not putting in place the rigor to automate and make things routine, you will not be able to grow.
Yes.
Because you're spending in the human context, you're spending your cognitive load on your day-to-day.
That is so well said, and so amazing to hear you say that, because I've thought on this on similar lines many times in the past, and I think that the whole idea of startups are a place, and they are a place where you get a lot of action, you have a lot of you build a lot of things, you create a lot of processes, systems, teams, cultures, etc. But I think there are some things that you need to always be on the watch out for where change is needed, but in other things, getting into the routine is way more important.
Absolutely.
So,
correct. And people underappreciate the importance of routine.
For sure.
But,
cool.
Yeah.
Any other thoughts that you might have? And no pressure. I mean, if there are some that come to mind, please share.
No, and the other thing is, and especially for operations leaders and in the current environment, for what it's worth, being humane towards people, super important. Because we have a 40-year career that we'll live through. What we do today will potentially help us solve today's problems, but karma comes back. Always. So, and especially in operations where it's a very, very people-centric function. Most functions are. So, and tough times call for tough actions, but when you take those actions, how you treat people is super important. Many a times they're not in your hands, but you have to do what you have to do. But how you treat people in those times is a measure of your character. So being humane, and at the same time, when you're growing, and there are a bunch of companies who are growing phenomenally well, being cognizant that overhiring is not an answer, and throwing people at a problem is not a long-term answer is also important. To be calculated in hiring people so that you don't have to ask people to go when something's not working, right? I think is a lesson that I have learned along the way, and it's important that most people understand the importance of it, and of course being able to think system first, being able to use design principles to get the answer right the first time is super important. I think people also assume that iterations is a good way of solving. While it is a good way of moving things forward, it does not preclude that you should not be getting your first answer right. Most people assume that you can start with a shoddy answer and then reiterate your way out of a problem. It generally does not work. You have to get your first answer 85% right for sure.
Yeah, you can't be lazy. You can't use iteration as an excuse to be lazy.
Absolutely.
You've got to think through the problem and at least try your level best to get it right. And then, of course, there's iteration that will follow. And if you've done your homework, then that iteration becomes so much more clear and easier to do. And then just walking in without.
The excellence demands that you are good in your first attempt. And excellence should not be confused with perfection and hence inaction. But excellence is a pursuit. One should keep at it. But the starting point has to be better than good.
For sure. I agree. Can't be lazy about it.